Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started with this episode.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much to the listeners and the viewers. I am an academic, a young person who is very much interested in the history of Africa and the history of Southern Africa. The events that have led us to where we are currently, and the events that are still guiding and shaping us where we are going. So it has been a journey that is very interesting when you look at the history of Africa, predominantly from the 16th century, 17th century, 18th century up to now. I have that keen interest and that love for history. Apart from that, I'm an academic and a Pan-African, I would say, and a progressive young African who is all-encompassing and seeks to see the development of Africa in an inclusive, progressive society. I would say that is the person that I am. I also enjoy research, and I like to see progressive research, that is research that tends to develop Africa with all the other partners coming on board on the African continent as peers, as equals, and as benefactors in a 50-50 kind of relationship. That's the kind of worldview that I have. And I think more will come out as we talk and as we converse.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Lesley. And now, of course, I usually start with my own curiosity, that I'm trying to understand. Why did you choose history? Why did you choose this space, this area to make your contribution in the world? Why not in economy or, in other area? Why do you choose history?
History is very important. You need to understand that a society that does not know where it is coming from is a society that does not know where it is going. And a society that does not know history is a society that does not know its identity. So for me, it is very much important to understand my history, and not just my history, but how all the other communities around me are involved in that history. So it is quite interesting for me how communities have been shaped, how society has developed based on how events that happened in the past are seemingly being repeated today and seemingly forecasting what will happen tomorrow. In other words, history does repeat itself. And that's a phenomenon that we always see. It always repeats itself with different players, but the philosophy, the phenomenon is predominantly the same. So it is quite an interesting field of study, which I'm really grateful that I was not denied the opportunity to venture into it, either by interest, by design, or default. But I really love this space because it gives you the sense of belonging, the sense of identity, and it also gives you that worth, because if you know whence you are from, the root from which you are cut from, it also identifies you with the fruits that you can bear.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, history really is very, very important. I really wanted you to nail it there, and you did, because as far as we are concerned as a people, if we don't even know where we are coming from, then it's obvious that we don't know where we are going. That can really be very challenging for us in the world. So
Definitely.
yeah. So we are looking at the life of Nelson Mandela today, who was the former president of South Africa, and made a huge contribution in the world and in Africa. So let's start with his childhood, his whole background. Give us a kind of a general background so that we can have a context upon which we can take this argument today. Please go.
Yes. When we're talking about Nelson Mandela, we are now talking about an African icon, and it is very interesting and of great importance that we look at the background of such icons. The background of an individual tends to shape them to a large extent. And Nelson Mandela was born on the 18th of July in 1918. And he was born to a father who was a local chief in the Umtata area of present-day Eastern Cape. That is the Eastern Cape in the southeastern part of South Africa. And he grew up in a society that had its own challenges. He grew up as a young man having to grow up in those circumstances which each and every African child of that generation first, a generation of where you see the inequalities. His father had to lose his own land. He had to be dispossessed of his own land. And he saw that injustice. He grew up in that injustice. And he later on went on to study, pursue his studies at Fort Hare. And when he went to Fort Hare, of course, as he was growing up, he could not hide or could not suppress the need to address those kind of inequalities. By the way, his name was Rolling Hlanhla, which means troublemaker. I don't know whether the parents knew that he was going to be a troublemaker to the establishment of the day or not. But he was later on given the name Nelson by his teachers. So his parents gave him the name Rolling Hlanhla. The Nelson name of it came from the teachers. But all to say this, that he did not intend, of course, to be a troublemaker, but by default of requiring that which is just, that which is rightful, he might ended up having to be a troublemaker. His father died when he was 12, and his uncle had to step in as the guardian, made sure he got the necessary education that he could get, and the best of it that he could get. And that education is the one that capacitated him and enabled him to then finally get enrolled at the University of Fort Hare, where he was then, I think he was then expelled because of his political stance, and later on finished his law degree at the Wits University in Johannesburg. So his childhood is that of one who comes from a chieftainship. And I think by virtue of someone coming from a chieftainship, you'll be knowing that naturally you need to be a leader, and you need to provide that leadership. So it is usually a trait that is passed within the family. And they always remind you, by the way, in African cultures, they always remind you, if you come from a royal family, they always tell you, you are a leader. Remember, you are a leader. So it could have been one of those echoes that always rang in his ears, that you are a leader, and one day you need to provide that leadership. I wouldn't know, but I'm just thinking that it could have been one of those pushing factors to him, that my people need leadership, and I need to avail myself and provide that leadership if need be, and when called to do so. So his childhood is basically a humble childhood. I wouldn't say he came from a rich family. I would doubt that. So he really came from a basic African background, but with the privilege, at least, to go to school and to be capacitated to pursue a qualification. And by virtue of acquiring a qualification at that stage and at that age, would also enable one naturally to become an opinion leader by virtue of that education. So that's the basic background in a nutshell of this great icon.
When we are looking at individuals, sometimes it is important that we understand that they are normal human beings. No? They are not like they didn't come down from from the sky with all the quality, with all the possibility.
He indeed was human like any one of us,
No. It's really important to clarify that part, no? Otherwise, one would be saying, well, I'm not like him. I cannot be like him. If we look at the life of many people, many experts in the world who have achieved a lot, they come from very humble background, and they didn't get it easy. None of them get it easy, because if you get it easy, then they have no value. So if we are looking at the life of a man today who have passed through a lot of stress, then of course he's not a perfect person. He wasn't a perfect person in that he wasn't an angel. You cannot be an angel and be a leader. No, it's not possible. You are definitely going to step on stone. No. You are going to do things that people will not approve of. But that makes you a leader because you are going to stand for what you really believe in. Now, you said something that I want to sort of hook on to for a while, no? In that when he was in school, he was expert for political opinion or something like that. Can you like clarify that part a bit? Because now that he's in school, he has not been given the leadership position yet, even though he might have it somewhere, like you were saying, that coming from his background, he knew that one day he might become a leader. But at this time, he was nobody. We can even say that. So, but he was already creating a political. He was already expressing his political view, leading to his being a spare. Tell us something about that.
You need to, we need to understand that Forte seems to have been the hub of African politicians, particularly in Southern Africa. Their greatest minds that have passed through Forte, and obviously there was this established system of structural inequality, segregation based upon one's color and race, and those things naturally, if you're a human being, they will trigger some sort of redress, especially from the one who's the disadvantaged and the oppressed. And being in a school system that is designed in that way, it is not generally him alone who responded to that kind of scenario, but a number of them did respond. But yes, during that time, he was really not at a point where we could talk, where people could be talking about him as someone who was popular or anything of that sort. No, it was basically some form of student activism, and most students who tend to go through the university system, one way or the other, they tend not to escape that. And now, given the circumstances of the time, where one could get preferential treatment by virtue of them being white, and get other treatment by virtue of being black, that definitely, if you were someone who loves justice, who loves equality, or who loves reconciliation and peace, the traits that we later on see in him, I would believe that those are the same traits that would have probably pushed him to respond and act in a manner that the authorities would have finally ended up expelling him or considering him a misfit in that society, probably by leading out in the activities, or influencing in a way, being an opinion leader of some sort, and driving the opinions of the other students that were also part of that system. So he started being involved at the university level, but he later on joined the ANC in 1943, and then later on became part of the Youth League in 1944. And it could be, it was in his youthful days when he did that. And those are the same years that coincide with him being at university as well. So opinion, philosophy, and activism, all being driven by structural inequality that you first experience, feel, see, and touch each and every day of your campus life, would inevitably come naturally.
Absolutely. Some of these things they do come naturally, and it's really very important. Another thing I would like you
Yes.
to speak to just now is that is the time that Nelson Mandela was growing up as a youth. So tell us about the South Africa of that time, because now we're looking at individual who is sort of challenging the status quo, the system that be. So for somebody who is probably trying to understand, why would somebody even challenge a system anyway? Because if the system is favorable, because we didn't see a white South Africa challenging the system this time. We're looking at a black African who was born and who look at the society, and he makes an his own evaluation. One thing I really want to point out here is that we should not be afraid to say what we see, because we don't think we shouldn't think that we must be 80 years old, 100 years old before we can say, oh, I don't like that. No, you don't have the guarantee that you'll be 100 years
Yes.
old. If you are 10
Yes.
years old, and at 10 years old you know that something is not right, just say it. You see?
Yes.
So now, the South Africa of the time of Nelson Mandela, of his youth, tell us something about that. So that when you say something was not right, people need to understand, what does it really mean something was not right?
Okay, we need to understand that the challenges of Mandela's youthful days preceded by, firstly, the events of 1652. 1652 should be a very critical date in time. 1652, when the Europeans arrived on the coast of South Africa, they embarked on a mission, and the things that they made sure they did is that they acquired land. They acquired land by use of force where necessary, and in some circumstances they used the blank check, the blank agreement or check system, whereby they tricked the local chiefs into agreements of selling their land unawares. You see, so the blacks had been dispossessed of their land. The blacks had been dispossessed of their livestock. The blacks had been impoverished, so to speak. So coming from a system whereby your means of production has been taken away from you, you are an impoverished person. Now you are living at the mercy of the white man. That's the kind of the system, a background that we're talking about. And looking at the circumstances, you have been vanquished, so to speak. You have been totally conquered and you are dominated. And in those circumstances, many would throw in the towel, like you were saying, that many would just comply with the system and not challenge the status quo, and just say, you can't fight a system and win. You just have to conform, But for Nelson Mandela and the other youths of his time, they decided that we will not just sit down and conform to this kind of unjust, evil, and illegal system. So they decided to stand against it. But first of all, you need to understand that his initial stance was, they initially believed in passive resistance. So use all the legally possible and necessary means to confront the system, to at least respect and honor that an individual, whether black or white, is worth their means, worth their life. There must be equality on basis of everyone being human. There mustn't be inequalities, there mustn't be any segregations of any sort. So this is the kind of approach that they had as youths, because whether you liked it or not, you were just going to be segregated. Whether you liked it or not, you were just going to feel it. Remember, this thing was, you could feel it, you could see it, you could touch it. So it's either you conform or you resist. So those were the options that were there, but many would choose the easy way. But for those, remember, Nelson Mandela went to do law, and by virtue of doing law, I think in a way that would have also influenced him to say, if you are a lawyer, obviously you want to see justice being done, and justice means that everyone must be treated fairly and equally so. And the justice system must be seen to be doing that. And obviously that would prompt someone to stand against injustice, but obviously do it within the confines of the law. But when that law is on itself is illegal, what do you have to do then? That's the major challenge that then they were forced. You realize that at the later stage in life, he was then instrumental in the formation of the military wing of the ANC, which is called the Umkhonto weSizwe, because they realized that the passive resistance will not work. They have to go on an offensive, because first of all, the freedom was taken by force of arms. For it to be gained, it has to be gained by some form of pressure, militarily, pressure politically, pressure socially, pressure even internationally. So all forms and all means have to be implemented. But for what? For a black person to be recognized as an equal, which could necessarily be done without all that much stress and ado. But no, the white man was not ready to do that. They would rather go for years and years of political resistance, military resistance, for them to then recognize that we can be equal with the fellow black man. So these are really the challenges that they were faced. I'm sure it is one of the things that would go through his mind to say, am I doing the right thing? Should I continue with this? Is it the right direction to take? Obviously, there are always those conflicting ideas, but I think he was convinced that he was doing the right thing. Otherwise, if he wasn't, he wouldn't have persevered for that long to be in the struggle from 1943 up to the time of his death, being standing for the same principles. I think he wouldn't have stood that long on the same principles as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You need to be really convinced of what you are doing, totally convinced of it, up to the point of putting your life at stake. So
Definitely.
a lot of conviction need to be there. Yeah. Now, before Nelson Mandela became the political figure that he became, before he went to prison, how Tell me something about his organizational ability, because in this channel, we talk a lot about leadership. We talk about a people-oriented leadership, which means that you need to have
Yes.
certain characteristics, not just because somebody put you in the position, but you need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to organize the people. So knowing how to be able to organize the people is one of the characteristics that a good leader must have. So now,
Yes.
even before he became the leader that we come to know him for, how did he manage to organize with the youth of his time, when he saw the injustice that was perpetrated against the South African people, against the people who the European invader consider as as inferior to them. So for this, they have the right to take the land that
Mm-hmm.
belongs to somebody else and say, you you are nobody. You can't do anything. I will take your land. I will do what I like. So he, as an individual, knowing that this was not right, he revolted. But he didn't revolt alone, because as an individual, you really cannot do anything. You can
Yes,
do
you
something,
can.
but you are just like a fly, no? They will just
Mm.
kill you like this. But when you organize, when you pull some other people of similar mindset together, then you can do a lot. Of course, like we see happen in South Africa. Now, how did he
Mm-hmm.
manage to organize at those early stage?
Yeah, you'll find that in his early career, he joined 1943, and then 1944, he was instrumental in the formation of the Youth League, the ANC Youth League, and he later on became one of the. He later on became the president of the Youth League, and being part of the Youth League, it meant that one would have been seen with the powers to lead, or the abilities and skills to lead. One thing we can agree is that he was one person who was charismatic. Um, and one major trait that we see in Nelson Mandela is that he was one person who seemed not to be so much self-centered. Um, he tended to consider others before himself. This is a common trait that I do see in his character, up to the time when he really gets to the highest position of power, and he exhibits it at the most critical time when you expect one to hold on to that power. He gives it away. So it's a trait that I see, that he was charismatic. And at that stage, there were very few learned blacks, by the way. And the fact that one had just studied would make you an opinion leader and a power of influence, and an influencer and an influential person. And not just being learned, but also having studied law. And he worked with the great minds in the ANC who were very instrumental. O.R. Tambo were one of those people who were unifiers. They were charismatic, and they were purposeful, and they were determined people. So he worked with the right people at the right time. He had the right personality and the right education at the right time, which naturally meant that it was not so much of a difficult thing to organize and to lead. And indeed, we do see that he managed to execute that quite well, um, in terms of that unity, which is also seen at a later stage. Um, that is the transition stage, or from apartheid to the democracy. You see that critical skill coming in of a conciliatory spirit, of a unifying spirit, or of a peaceful spirit, a pacifying spirit. We tend to see it at a later stage. And it is important to note also that, in as much as that is good, it also needs to be balanced when we're pursuing a struggle, you need to balance between the two. Being a unifier, being a conciliatory person, and also making sure that you push the struggle, because there are certain things that are needed for the struggle to be pushed forward. For instance, when your opponent is not yielding, what do? Do you continue begging them, or you resort to other means to pressure them to come to the table or to give in to your demands? But all in all and over and above, the fact of the matter is, this was an equipped and well-educated person at the right time, with the right personality to engage with the common people. He came from a humble background, from a chieftainship, and in a chieftainship, you deal with subjects and people in the community. So I would like to believe that the background he had from his home also enabled him to maneuver the political space as well.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lesley. Now, when you were talking, making mention of maybe you are trying to negotiate with an opponent, and the opponent is non-yielding, what do you do? Up to the point of even taking up arm, like we saw in South Africa. This part is a little bit delicate, no? In that, when you look at the history of Africa, at least for the past 500 years or so, African people are in a situation that they really cannot call the shot. Of course, there are contracts that are signed all the places in Germany, in Berlin, in France, in Paris, in Rome, in Washington, which, of course, we just append our signature to, our political leader, of course, because they really do not call the shot. When it comes to the purpose, the position of negotiation, we don't really decide what we want, because I sort of look at Africa as POW, prisoners of war. Like, as if we had a war with the European, we lost the war, and we are their prisoners, so they do whatever they like. They do whatever they like to us. We don't have the possibility of able to say no. We can't say no. But this is not fair. And this had been hurting us for a long, long time. Now, what I want to say is this one, before I get to the question I want to ask you about Nelson Mandela, in that if the United States were to negotiate a deal with the United Kingdom, it's not in all the cases the United States will win, because even though the United States can basically discipline the United Kingdom because they have the military power and the rest of it, of course, there is a limit to where you can go, because the UK also have its own strength. But it is difficult for an African country to stand up against the German as a nation, for example, when it comes to making deal. And this is reflected in many things that is happening in Africa, from our education to our trade, the economy, to how we invest, how we do things. And all these sort of go around and around and around. Because in the negotiation, they don't have to respect us, because if they don't respect us, there is no consequences. So what I'm going at here is, in the days of the youth of Nelson Mandela, they realized that the European settler will not respect them. They will not listen to what they are doing, because they have nothing to lose. Was that the reason they took to violence? The violence resort to anything? Actually, that is not going to be the direct question, no? As if maybe, because, when something is happening, at a point, you just have to do whatever is necessary if you have to survive, okay? So I want you to help me to understand why they decide to go the other way when the other people were not listening to them.
You really understand that when you finally realize that all legally possible means and available means are being blocked. For instance, you're no longer allowed to express your views. At one point in time, even the ANC got banned the you are really muzzled in every way. You can't express yourself. You're not allowed to talk to people. You are not allowed to address anyone. You are not allowed to influence anyone. You are put in isolation, all those kind of things. You are resorted to the other available means, and then to resort to the armed struggle. So finally, Nelson Mandela says he was one of the people who became instrumental in pushing for the armed struggle, or the which culminated in the formation of the Umkhonto weSizwe military wing. Of course, they did some sabotaging kind of work to try and be heard. It was a matter of just trying to get some attention, to say, we are asking for 1, 2, 3. You have muzzled us, but we are resorting to these other means for us to be heard. But in actual fact, we can't really say they did wage a successful armed struggle and won. No, it was more of a negotiated kind of settlement, and it was more of international pressure, a combination of things. Remember, the circumstances that this is happening it's happening at a time where the rest of Africa is also experiencing civil wars, as all other African countries are fighting for their independence. So there are a lot of things at stake. There is also this war between socialism, communism versus capitalism, with America, Russia on the other side, and China on the other side, with the communist philosophy coming in. And there is this battle for the control of Africa in terms of ideology. So there are a lot of factors that were at play at that time, but it did work. The violence did work to a certain extent, because it got them to be heard in a way, but it also really backfired on them in a big way, because he finally got arrested with other colleagues, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment because of that. And after the Rivonia trial, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, and he was in prison for 27 years because, as a result. So you see that when all avenues of venting out are blocked, the only thing that one can do is to resort to the only option available to them that can make them at least get some attention. And in most cases, that will be violence, And it's also a lesson to us that it is important to leave these other forms and parts of venting out open, to allow people to express themselves, people to say what they really feel if they're not really happy, and try and vent out their frustrations and expectations. Because if you muzzle them and block them from saying anything, it might resort them to taking up desperate measures. And we all know that desperate measures usually are costly, because they definitely have nothing to lose. Because when you are left with nothing to lose, then you can resort to anything and do it to anything, to anyone, and anyhow, So yeah, they were left with no option, and they had to pursue that. But the important thing is they did not block the negotiation aspect as well. They continued knocking on the negotiation aspect as they continued with the other activities. And it's a common phenomenon that we tend to see with all other African countries who were fighting for their political freedom. They also used the same approach, and I think it did work to a large extent.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to remain here for another question. In that, it's not as if when I said before that when all avenue is not possible, that you just have to do anything necessary
and
to
yes,
survive. It's not really as if I'm trying to advocate for violence here, but we have to understand that there is an adage in my place. I think in many places that there is a limit to where you can push a cattle, for example. If you get to the limit that you can't push, it's going to come back to you. It's just a natural law. Now,
yes,
let me put it like this. Would the Italian accept it like this? That other countries come to their land to take their land and treat it the way the Dutch, the Germans, or other Europeans came to South Africa and treat them? Would they accept it without resorting to violence? Would the America accept it like this? Will the Chinese accept it like this? Will the Russians accept it like this? Because we must understand it from this perspective that we are not like talking of somebody who have stolen your property, and now you are an innocent, and this person you are now fighting. Sorry, we are not looking at a person who is innocent and then is a victim in this case. We are looking at a victim who is crying for his freedom to be alive. That is the situation. Somebody came from a very far place and occupied a land that had been occupied for several years. And we are saying, you cannot be violent. But I don't even understand that. I don't even understand what that means. If you go to any country in Europe and try to dispossess their land, they are going to cut you into pieces and put you in a pot. That is what the European will do.
yeah.
So there is not even argument on what is right or what is not right. This is their land. They are ready to defend it to the last drop of their blood. So when we are talking of the violence in South Africa or people resorting to violence, we must understand that they are fighting for their right to exist. If they don't do it, then they will be wiped out. Maybe, I don't know if that is a better option. So now, looking at this individual South African who have been able to impact people in a lot of ways, what really separates him from other people? Why are we talking about him? Because he was not the only person at the time. Of course, I'm not saying that other people did not collaborate with it. That is not what I'm saying. But his impact has been very, very important. So what separates him from other people around?
Yeah, that's a very good observation, because there are a lot of South African icons who have fought for the South African freedom. I think what gives Nelson Mandela the limelight more than everyone else was the role that he then played as the first Black president. That is what then tends to give him more limelight than anyone else. You know definitely that when you just take over power from a point of being the oppressed, not just being the oppressed, but being in prison for 27 years, and with hard labor, being in prison for 27 years, unjustly imprisoned for that matter, fighting for your own birthright, with parents that have been dispossessed of their land that has been stolen from them, forced by the use of force, and with the people that have been killed for standing for that, for asking for that redress. And then you come to be in charge of the political power and the organs of state, and then you call for reconciliation. That seems somewhat awkward, because the oppressor expects a reaction. And now, when the oppressor does not see that reaction, definitely there must be something extraordinary about you. Now, when we look at him from that context, we also need to understand that he is probably a person who looked things from a holistic kind of view. And made the necessary decisions that he made at the time, and those decisions being the best decisions that he could make at that particular time. And for us then to understand that, we need to look at the context of the negotiations, the context of the transition, and the context of his first term of the presidency. And then, as you rightfully said, it is always an issue that you do not want to see a neighbor being the one who's always making very good praises of the neighbor's wife. It becomes a questionable thing. Why are you praising my wife that much when you are my neighbor and you praise her more than I do personally as the husband? So it also makes us to look at why so much glamour, why so much praise is also placed on Nelson Mandela by the superpowers, so to speak. That is the American presidents, the people from Europe, the international conglomerates. It becomes an interesting topic altogether when we start to look at that. Looking at the initial philosophy that he espoused the Marxist philosophy when he was starting his political career, how it all transcended, how it all evolved until we get to a point where we then have him being praised by the same powers that were behind the sustenance of the system that jailed him for 27 years. So indeed, there are a lot of icons, but him is of particular interest because he's the one who then became the first Black president and came up with certain policies that he did implement, oversaw the transition. And I would say he managed to establish peace in his first term of the presidency. Indeed, he managed to bring in that cohesion that was necessary for the stability of the nation to take place.
All right. Now you touched something very important. Of course, I have a question for you that that I put on my line. I'm going to get to that later, which have to do with why some Africans look at Nelson Mandela as a sellout. But anyway, we'll come to that. Now,
Yeah.
let's look at this period of struggle in South Africa, where a lot of South Africans were being massacred by forces of the European, let's call it like that, because they came from Europe. That is where they came from. And many international bodies that today we cry, oh, Amnesty International, the United Nations, the peace so-called, the Vatican, for example, and their huge power, what were they doing and how were they justifying their action or inaction to you people, the South African, of why a certain people were allowed to come to your land and dispossess of you, and that was right according to their own version of right and wrong? How will they justify that to you?
Yeah, that is a very important question, because you need to understand that at times the so-called international law or human rights, they tend to apply at a particular stage of time, and does not apply at a particular stage of time. This has been an imponderable fact. It's unavoidable. It's a fact of history. It's there on paper. It's immortalized in history. We have experienced it. We live it. We have tested it. For instance, when the land was taken by force of arms, no property rights are spoken about. No property rights are mentioned. When the blacks were dispossessed of their land, and dispossessed of their wealth, dispossessed of their livestock, no one talks about the human rights. When the blacks were being killed, when the blacks were being oppressed, no one talks about human rights. No one talks about property rights. No one talks about anything of that note. But was there no property before the introduction of these colonial systems? Was there no property rights before the colonialists came this side of the earth? It's an important question, and a question for another day. Are we saying that we did not have rights before these people came here? Are we saying our own African political systems and traditional systems did not respect human rights? These are other important aspects that we need to look at. So do human rights apply when the black man is the one who's at the wrong side of the law, but it does not apply when the black man is the other one who's the victim? These are now questions that still matter even today, still need to be talked about even today, still need to be addressed even now. Because when we hear about these human rights, we hear them now. When we're talking about the address of the colonial injustices, to make sure that those who were colonially disadvantaged are empowered and given back what rightfully belongs to them. That's when the law is now being quoted. That's when now we are being told about the rule of law. So are we saying there was no rule of law when the colonial system was not there? Were we living without laws here in Africa? Definitely not. So you'd find that my brother, there tends to be a winking at injustices whenever they favor a certain narrative. But whenever the narrative has to change and the opposite kicks in, now we hear a lot of cries about the human rights and whatnot and what so forth. Whenever an African country starts to make sure that they address the injustices of colonialism, that's when we hear a lot of cries about the rule of law, the respect of the law. We need to uphold property rights and all that other kind of a lot of talk along those lines. But when the people were being attacked in the streets and being shot at and being abused by the apartheid government, no major noises were being made. Of course, the United Nations did sanction the apartheid government. There was also some bit of international pressure. It was not all of them who were complicit, but we tend to see that there is some sort of reluctance when it comes now to the core issues. When it comes now to the core issues, we tend to see them taking a neutral role rather than an active role to seek and see that justice is done and done completely.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Leslie. Really appreciate that. You see, one of the reasons why we are here talking about history, in the beginning, I asked you, why do you have to talk about history? It is important that we talk about it because, unfortunately, because we are in this situation, the system, let's put at it, the global system, put Africa at a situation of life and death. So we, at the moment, we are just trying to survive to be alive. So it tends of really try to challenge the major things that are putting out in the system. We're not really at that level yet because you first of all need to be alive to be able to fight, But we are going to have to fight. We will get there. We have not got it there. We are not fighting. We don't have army. We don't have weapon. We don't even have the weapon of knowledge yet. But we'll get to that.
Mhm.
Because, for example, you see, when you look at the Bible, it was not, even according to the narration of the Bible, some people came from outside to Egypt.
Yes.
They assassinated somebody, and that same person that killed the person, that killed an Egyptian citizen, was the one that was giving the law. How, you are a lawbreaker. How can you be the upholder of the law? The universal God, let's call it so, the God who knows everything, had to put you in charge of the law. So that Moses, who killed an Egyptian citizen, who was supposed to be in prison because he broke the law, because there was already law, because they just take out some from already existing law, and they said this is the law that was brought by God. But how can you, a breaker of law, be an upholder of law? The same thing is what we are talking about here now in South Africa. So Europeans came to Africa, and they took a piece of land, and then they want to tell you about the law. What do you know about the law if you are a lawbreaker?
So in essence, what it is,
No, please go if you want to say something.
Okay. In essence, when they talk about the law, they know it protects their rights, their interests, and that's why they talk a lot about it.
No, it's really funny, no? You know, it is funny in that you say now, when all this one was happening, the South Africa should have cried out to the United Nations, hey, please come and rescue us. Because like they are doing now when they want to intervene in Congo and some other places. Those anyway, I don't really want to be so harsh, on the system, on the international system, I just want to control my temper there. But Africa, we should understand that we are being treated unfairly. And we will never be treated fairly. There is no guarantee until the person who is treating you unfairly know that you can dash the person a heavy blow. At the moment, Africa cannot challenge any major European country. For that reason, Africa can never be respected. If they sign any contract with you, they do not respect you because you cannot do anything about it. Our politicians steal all the money and go to hide it in some countries in Europe. One day they tell you the money is gone. What are you going to do? Nothing. You can't do anything because you don't have power. If you don't have power, you don't have any respect. Because power always leads to power. When you don't have any power, the other power have nothing to respect. So if we want to be respected, we must look for a way to organize ourselves, be able to hold a certain section of the power. So that when they tell you you cannot do that, you also say, no, you too, you cannot do that. The power is speaking to power.
Yes.
All right. Now, you see, something very important before we, I made mention of it before. Some people, some scholars, or even some individual look at Nelson Mandela as a sellout. This is not a hidden thing, If your explanation, it could even be obvious there, Why would a certain power that was your opponent suddenly become your friend? How did it happen? Help us to explain this part.
That one is a tricky one, eh? First of all, we need to understand what is the basis or the premise of why people come up with that notion. Is that you need to understand, first of all, what was the reason for fighting the system? What was the reason? If you go to war, you have the reason for the war. What is the reason for the war? What are the aims and goals for the war? After the war, when you've gained your victory, what is it that you seek to address? What is it that you want to gain? So you have objectives for what you're going to do with the power after getting it. What is it that is pushing you to wage the war in the first place? Now, it is a known thing that every African country or every colonized country, be it in Europe, be it in America, be it in Australia, Africa, When they went to war, they were fighting for the land. Land was the primary reason for fighting. Point number one. Point number two, political freedom. Point number three, which is linked to the land, economic freedom, self-determination, self-actualization. So when now you have found the political freedom and you realize you now have your political freedom, what is the next step? The next step is to address the economic freedom. How do you address it? You have to give back your people the land and the means of production. So one thing that I will tell you that I tend to realize, and it's a common phenomenon in all African countries now and all former colonies, is that the colonialists realized that there is no way we're going to stop political freedom from coming. But they were a step ahead. They said we were going to give them political freedom. But when it comes to economic freedom, we'll give the political freedom with conditionalities to the economic freedom. Now, because there will be euphoria over the political freedom, that now you can vote and you can vote for the leader that you want. And now you can move around town and drink the kind of whiskey that you thought was a disadvantage for you not to drink it and go to certain places that you thought were segregation for not you being allowed into them. You tend to forget the core business. The core business was, first of all, political freedom. But there is no independence that is complete without also economic freedom. So what it means that Nelson Mandela was very much instrumental in the bringing about of the political freedom. And I would very much say, as someone who had battled the system for long, there are certain issues that he was privy to that most people might not have been might not have had the privilege to see from outside. You see, probably the idea of realizing that the system is too big to fight, but there are also multinational corporations that are involved. We have the IMF, we have the World Bank, we have the international investors. We have a completely complicated kind of economic system that was now in place in South Africa at the time of the attainment of the political freedom or the independence, so to speak. So I would believe that at the particular time, he might have had made the right decisions according to him at that moment. But that was a step for a progression to go to step number 2 or stage to the next stages in making sure that after attaining the stability, make sure then that you start to empower and equip your people. It's a sad scenario that whenever African states have had to gain their independence, they always gain their independence and found themselves at the mercy of the international economic system when it comes to the economics of the day. And you cannot escape that. That's the situation that is there. Remember, the system was favoring whites over the locals. So what it means is that most of the critical key areas of the economy are in the hands of those who are aligned to the oppressor more than those who have your interests at heart. So you then have to make some trade-offs at that particular moment to make sure that your economics do not collapse, but not compromising on the very principles why you were fighting in the first place. But also remember that when that was also happening, so there were negotiations here. to the transition to the democracy, there were negotiations. The apartheid government also had their concessions to make. The ANC government in waiting also had their concessions to make. And each and one of them, they had critical areas in which they said they would not yield. But overall, there were compromises to be made. We might not be privy to the actual compromises made, but there were compromises made. And for us to see that that which transpired, or what transitioned, was political freedom and not economic freedom, we just need to see what transpired in the first years of his presidency. Yes, the government did take certain stake in some of the critical key areas of the economy, but it was at a very slow pace. The generality of the population continued to live in areas that were overpopulated. There was no change to the land ownership structure that was prevalent before the dawn of the political independence, and just prior to that. So the pace we now hearing 27 years now into the democracy, there's still debates on the amendment to the constitution in terms of how land should be expropriated, whether it should be expropriated without compensation or whether it should be expropriated with compensation 27 years after that independence. So you see that the critical core areas have not yet been dealt with, so to speak. But one thing I can give to Mandela is that he provided the stability that was needed at the particular time. And I strongly believe that those who then followed after him are the ones then that should have taken it a step further to go on with it. But you need also to understand that Kwame Nkrumah once said that neoliberalism, neocolonialism will come in the form of international investors. He mentioned that a long time ago. And that's basically that we tend to see now in Africa. These so-called investors and foreign direct investment tends to precede everything else. And we need to look at whose interests do those really serve. Does it translate to bread and butter issues of the person on the streets? Does the person on the street can say, really, I am fully independent, I have been liberated, and what do they have to show for that liberation? So if you would ask a young person now and say, how do you view this iconic work or this great icon, what do they have to say? Do they have to say, indeed, he did this part and that part and that part, and that part and this part, indeed, I see it has benefited me 27 years down the line? Because you remember, when you implement a policy, it benefits those who are yet to come in years to come. So it is quite a sensitive area to talk about, but there were concessions that were made. Some of them we are not really privy to them, but I would really think that one thing that is quite clear is that the land was not addressed. The land issue was not addressed at that time, and I think it was.
So the real issue have not been addressed. That is,
yes, the real issues have not been addressed. Yes,
okay.
The real issues have not been addressed. So if the real issues have not been addressed, then it's not yet uhuru. The struggle has to continue. The movement has to continue, and the real issues have to be addressed for things to be where they're supposed to be.
Thank you very much for that. To say that this issue is not complex, we will be denying, we'll be lying to ourselves. It's really complex. But of course, we are human beings. Sometimes we need to face it, Sometimes we need to take it one piece at a time. You see, now let's even look at the possibility in a world that we live in today of a possibility that some gang just move away from Nigeria and go to, let's say Senegal and occupies the land. And the United Nations will be deciding, well, this is not actually right. Okay, but we can't do anything about it. Let's just sanction Nigeria. That is not how it happened. You should take an immediate and a reaction to make sure that the people of Senegal is protected from the invaders from Nigeria. That is how it should work. Because if you don't do it, it will lead to war and millions of people will die. That is more costly than taking the right and appropriate action. The United Nations could have done something, or people say before the United Nations, the Europeans could have done something, but they just didn't do anything. But let people take the issue even further than that. Is it really true that that small percentage, that small people, that small group of Europeans in South Africa really did have the power to do what they did? Is it really possible? I don't think it is possible. It is only possible because the big power in Europe supported them. They supplied them and they were in charge. They sanctioned them. That is why it was possible. Now, when Mandela was free, of course, they have already calculated first plan, second plan, third plan, out of fifth plan. That is, if Mandela had decided to say, we take back the land, there was going to be war in South Africa. So that by saying that Nelson Mandela makes some decision that may have been unpopular to the people, it's because it was not simple. These are not simple decisions. These are decisions about life and death. So he's an intelligent person. He did, of course, sometimes you can even say, actually, he did some sellout. Yes. But we have to look at the consequences of those actions. South Africa was not ready for what could have happened. The Europeans would have supplied the army to really crush those countries. There would have been a lot of suffering in the land. So I think these are some of the things that Mandela and some other person working with him looked into before they made the decision. Really, like you said, the real issue have not been taken care of in South Africa, just like it is in many other parts of Africa. And this should not be surprising to us because we already said it before, that when you enter into a negotiation with a party, a partner, the only way you will respect it is that there is going to be a consequence. But South Africa doesn't have the possibility of able to punish if some other European country were to gang up to reclaim the land. They don't have the power. They don't have the possibility. They don't have the army. They don't have the weapon to do it. So it's not even South Africa this time. Let's look at the whole of Africa. If there were a strong Nigeria military, a strong Nigeria politics, a strong Nigeria country, what happened in South Africa will not happen because Nigeria will intervene. Just like, for example, in Europe, a country cannot come from Asia and take Italy. Even though Italy might not have the power, let's say Italy doesn't have the power, for example, France and Germany will not permit it. They will save their people.
Yes.
In Africa, we don't have countries that are strong enough to defend their neighbors. So we, like I said before, we are just prisoners of war. They can do whatever they like. We are just praying for some invisible God to come and intervene. Now, I picked something important from what you were saying before, and I think it's very important in terms of leadership, in terms of the future of Africa, that if we know something, if we have the power somehow, let not only care for ourselves. Let's try to empower the people behind us. Because in one way or the other, they are going to come for you. They are going to demand your head like they did to Gaddafi. But if you empower the people around you, they might still be able to conquer those people, but the message will go down. Africa, at the moment, even in the next 50 years, you don't have the power to be able to claim what belongs to it. Because that is what is making the big economy to prosper in Europe and in the United States. We know that. But just like I said before, we can't do anything about it. We are powerless. Until we empower ourselves, we build on ourselves for tens and tens of years to come, then we will be able to stand and say, yes, that belongs to me. I want it. I want it, or there will be a consequence. All right, now we are coming back to the person of Nelson Mandela, because he really did some incredible, powerful things that we must remember him for. So the question would be, if you were to draw out a lesson, say maybe 3 important things that Nelson Mandela did, what would be those things?
Perseverance, determination, the love for your country, and the ability. I would say the 3 major lessons that I pick from him is that first of all, build an inclusive society that is peaceful, self-respecting, and loving. The second one is that of determination, putting others first before yourself, and making sure that you self-sacrifice for the greater good. And the third lesson that I would say is humility. You know, the ability to let go and give others a chance. That was the most striking one for me, given the fact he had spent 27 years in prison, and he just serves 1 term and says, no, it's fine, I can rest now, let me give the baton to the next person. That was really, really, really exemplary and a mature standard to set for a new democracy.
That is important. And now we didn't say something up to the position of challenges, because looking at the complex situation in South Africa and the deed that Nelson Mandela might have made that led to him serving a term, and maybe serving only 1 term. I don't know if that was part of the deed that he might have made. Of course, these guys would have faced a lot of challenges. Some of you, of course, you already mentioned. I want you to speak to that effect, because I don't see any simplicity in what has happened there. So tell me, what are the challenges that Nelson Mandela faced up to the point of becoming the president of the country, and of course, the historic icon that they become for all of us?
Yeah, the South African scenario is a complicated one, in the sense that it was a situation. Okay, it was a situation where you had structural inequalities, and some of them they're still felt even now, even though they've been addressed, but they're still existing in society, and are still being addressed. And then you have about 11 plus smaller tribes in the country. And then you have Indians, you have coloreds, and then you have your British whites, and then you have got the Afrikaners. It's a diverse kind of situation, a diverse kind of community. And now, making sure that there is harmony in that kind of diversity is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing, because if you are a leader, you have to make sure that you bring harmony, unity of purpose, and provide direction to such divergent views. Remember, some of the people are very cultural, some of the people are not that cultural, some of the people are very learned, some of them are not even learned at all. So the value systems and the perceptions, the worldviews are divergent, but bringing all that into unity and being able to move with unity of purpose, that was a great challenge. But for me, he was more of a moderator and managed to win over all sides for the sake of peace. So, but above all, it shows that he knew how to work with people, because you wouldn't have done that alone. It means that he made sure that he worked together with his team to bring that and make sure that that happened. Because as an individual, definitely you can't do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Now, I'll ask you a question that is not directly linked to South Africa, but the whole of Africa, because all of us, we are basically in the same boat. Like I said
Yeah.
before, if there were a successful one country, if there was one United States in Africa, what happened in South Africa will not happen, no? Because the next day
Yeah.
they will be packing their load, no? But all of us are strongly with them. Of course, there was a huge contribution from Nigeria, no? There is no doubt about that.
Yes.
We know, but
Yeah.
I'm talking of more than that. Nigeria do not have the possibility, because if Nigeria were to do that, the next day there will be war in Nigeria from a European country. It's a very complex situation, though. It's a very complex and delicate situation. We know that. So, because this is where we find ourselves, and we want to be free, because I do believe strongly, positively, that a generation of Africans are coming that are going to liberate our countries and our continent. I do strongly believe it. Of course, not us. We do not have the preparation. We do not have the education. We do not have the possibility at the moment, because we are up against a people that are 10, 15 times prepared than we are. I'm not saying that they are better, but prepared, because it's about preparation. So a generation of Africans are coming, but they have not come yet. While we are waiting for that, what do you think we can do in terms of politics and strategies and preparation and negotiation to be moving towards independence? Because we are not independent today. Forget those people that just put in position to manage the resources for America and for Europe. They are just there for managing. We need people to represent the African interest. How can we be moving towards those areas? What do we need to be able to move towards those areas?
I think that one is a very important question. And you need to understand that initially, Africa used to be a trade hub for the world. Everyone who came here initially came to trade until they realized that they could come and impose themselves on us. But to answer your question, we need to decolonize everything. We need to decolonize our politics. We need to decolonize our law, decolonize our constitutions, decolonize our education, decolonize our research and our economics. Everything that has to do with Africa has to be African-centered, to serve African purposes and perspectives, and make sure that our youths know their history, and make sure that our youths have an education that serves Africa and the African needs. And even the health systems, all the systems, basically, they need to be decolonized, because we tend to have westernized kind of systems. Everything is westernized, and our education is westernized. The authors that we study about are Western. Everything that we read about, even about birds in Africa, we read it from Western authors. even if we talk about the water, we read books on water from Western writers, but we've been staying with water in Africa for generations. So we need to make sure that there is a paradigm shift to an African-centered paradigm. African think tanks that address and uplift and focus on the upliftment of the African child. That is very important in every aspect and in every sphere. If we do that, you will understand that all this will be possible. For instance, in our politics, as you rightly asked, what kind of political systems do we follow? What is it when they talk about political science, political administration, what political science are they studying? Whose politics are they studying? European politics, American politics, the French politics? What about our African politics? And when we talk about democracy, whose democracy are we talking about? The American democracy, European democracy, or African democracy? Well, when we talk about economics, whose economics are we talking about? What purpose is that economics serving? Who is the benefactor of the economics? You see, we need to make sure that everything that revolves around Africa is Africanized for the purposes of benefiting Africa. And whoever then comes to Africa must come to Africa as fellows at the same footing, not determiners, not as domineering, and must address and engage Africans as equals, not as puppets. And that we need to make sure that it happens, and it has to happen as soon as yesterday. And it has to start with our children. We need to properly orient them, teach them the right thing, know and teach them that as Africa, we are the benchmark of European civilization now as we speak. We are the benchmark of Western civilization as we speak. If Africa was to wake up today and say, no, we no longer want to give you our resources for free as we are currently doing now, it's either you get our resources at a price or the highway. That will be the end of European civilization. That will be an end of Western civilization. And this, the imperialists, they know. And they prepare well in advance by pushing neoliberal policies and push colonialism through so-called Western trained and educated finance ministers, you name it, in order to make sure that they continue with the control of an economics of the African continent through their proxies in those critical sectors of the African economies. So we need to make sure that we safeguard against that and protect ourselves from that. If we push an ideological mindset within the African child's mind, it will liberate the African child's mind. And a liberated mind is a different mind. And a different mind results in a different behavior and a different approach. And indeed, a different term and form of empowerment.
Thank you very much. That is the right word here, the empowerment of the mind, because we need to liberate ourselves from the crutches where we are today, which unfortunately is the situation. We need to be free, and because currently we are not.
We are not, yeah.
So thank you so much, Dr. Lesley. It has been really a big pleasure on my part to hear you and to reflect on the situation that is affecting all of us as Africans, as people of African descent, and in a particular way of South Africans, because the discussion today had mainly be about South Africa. We have talked about different angles in the argument. Of course, we have barely scratched the surface because it's more complex than it appears. So we will need more time to continue to dig in and in and in and in. But for time
Definitely.
constraint, we will not be able to do that today. So definitely another occasion we'll be able to continue the conversation. Now, to conclude this this discussion, what would be your final reflection? As it can be a message to the people that are listening to us, maybe something you wanted to say I didn't ask you, a way that this conversation can end in a positive note, in an encouraging note, that we should never lose hope because we are going to overcome. Please leave out the message.
Thank you very much. The message that I would like to leave with everyone listening and the Africans in particular is that it is never an easy road, but we'll finally get there. The first stage we achieved, we are going to the next stages, and indeed we're going to achieve our total freedom and our total freedom in our lifetime. It is the time for Africans to be empowered in every aspect, in every sphere. And indeed, it is a possibility, it is a reality that we're going to achieve. Let's continue and work hard to make sure that we pass on the message and empower each other and encourage each other and support each other as Africans. And as long as we are united, we can do it. And we don't need to look at ourselves and think that we are somewhat inferior. No, we are not. And we need to understand that there is nothing wrong with us. It's only that we have been seriously disadvantaged for centuries. But our time of catching up is now. And we have to do it. And it has to start with us, firstly, by the liberation of the mind. We need to understand that Africa can do it without the approval of the West. Western standards are not our standards, but we can adapt them, adopt them, and make use of them to our capacities and necessities. As the greatest icon of the Pan-African movement, Kwame Nkrumah, said, Western ideas, when they come, let's take them. Let's look at the good. Let's leave out the bad. Let's adopt them. Let's implement them if they're the best and for our best interests, in order to make sure that we push for the total emancipation and empowerment of our own people. For indeed, there is another form of colonization that will come in the form of investors. And we are seeing it in our time. How prophetic was the message spoken back then by the great son of the soil. But indeed, we remember Kwame Nkrumah and say, those words are still living today. And on that note, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be speaking at this great platform. And it has been a pleasure, and I really did enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, my brother. I really appreciate it. The pleasure is on my path. And like you have said to our audience, we as African, we must know, it is very, very important that we know that there is nothing wrong with us. If we are in the situation that we are today, it's because there is a concentrated effort to put us the way we are. And one important thing to note is that there is no intention for the person or the people who are putting on in this situation to ever make sure that this change. If this is going to change, it's going to depend on you as Africa and me. Because the person who put shade on our hand is very happy that this is the way it is. That we are fighting over things that are not important, whereas while we are fighting, they are taking away the land and the resources to service their economy. That has been the intention. And it is our duty to educate ourselves to know. So thank you, all of you, for having accompanied us to the end of this conversation, and continue to join and support us, because we are here ready to keep the conversation alive. So thank you very much, dear Lesley. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And definitely we're going to be talking about some of this issue again. So bye for now and have a good time.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi A14. Thank you so much for listening and talk to you in the next episode.